So, as you all are seeing here, today's talk will be about generative AI and its impact on photography, art, and MOC building. The goal of this presentation is not to go very deeply into the technical side of generative AI, but more to foster your imaginations and have you think a little bit about how you can increase your building capacity by using some of the tools available on the internet. So, before we jump into generative AI, let's talk about technology in LEGO. Technology is not new to LEGO. Technology has been around for a long time. Whether it's technology and how LEGO was built from its early days in wooden toys now to its injection molding models, all the way into how LEGO designs sets. Technology is everywhere, so technology is something that we want to embrace. So as we look into technology, I just wanted to call out some of the predecessors that came up before the generative AI topic that has been around for the last couple of years, and it's something that many of you may have already used in your day-to-day basis. So first one is BrickLink. How many people here have used BrickLink? Obviously, almost everyone in the audience's hands are raised. BrickLink is new. Well, not new. It was new. And when BrickLink first came out, BrickLink was something that was scary. A lot of people did not want to jump into this idea of digital Lego building. Lego was something that you had to build with your hands and was something that was sacred to many. But now, many years later, BrickLink is part of many designers' tools in order to build some great sets. BrickLink, as all are familiar, is just one of the many tools out there that are used to make Lego sets. And even some of the designers use tools akin to like BrickLink to build what they build on a daily basis. Another tool, which I've used on a daily basis, which is useful, is the Brickit camera app. So this is a camera app which actually scans your Lego bricks and gives you models that you can build with the bricks you have. It gives you pointers to what are some of the sets that are included in the brick pile you have, along with just ideas on things to build. Again, just an example of how you can enhance your Lego building. And the last one is just something that I used just very recently, is Custom Brick Mosaic. Custom Brick Mosaic was another technological tool which is used to upload an image and using technology converts the image into a mosaic size of your choice and leverages the Lego's color palette in order to build a great mosaic image. As you can see in the image on the top right, that is just an example of how I took a picture of Benny, fed the image into the BrickLink Mosaic Maker, and out spat a template that you can build your mosaics from. As you can see, these three are just a small example of things that many of us may already be using to improve their Lego building, but tools are there for our disposal, and tools are things that we want to keep adding upon. And this is where generative AI comes in. As I mentioned earlier, the goal of this talk is not to go super technical. However, I will give a high-level concept of what is generative AI before jumping into things. If people have interest into the technical side of things, please feel free to talk to me afterwards or share questions, and I'd love to have further conversations with you. As part of my day job, although I'm a Lego enthusiast, I'm also a software developer who has actually worked on some of the Copilot features that are on the market. So this is where the passions of the two came together and why I decided, hey, let's talk about this in the Lego context. So, what is generative AI? This deck is a very meaty deck for this slide alone. However, I will boil it down in high-level concept. So generative AI is an AI that uses machine learning to create new content, whether this content is images, audio, video, or text. All of these are driven by a set of instructions that you as a user have to provide. The AI is not something that will just generate something out of nothing. It's something that is often an engaging conversation that you can have with tooling to improve upon and build things. And I'll jump later into details on how this applies to Lego. But how does generative AI work? It's not magic. You don't just suddenly have a tool that will tell you the answers to life. All of these tools are fed by a really large set of data in the environment. So first, what happens is training happens. Training on large, rich data sets, and in the case of many of the common generative AI tools, whether this is Copilot or ChatGPT, these are often fed on the vast swaths of data that are available on the internet. All of this data is passed in and is used to train a model. These deep learning models will then learn and make decision-making on this data set and allows the tools to simulate what is available and based on the questions you ask, make inferments out of it. So once the model has been trained and it understands all of the data available, what it then does is you then have content generation. And this is where the user comes into the picture. The model can generate content based on what users ask. Users can ask a question, users can ask anything. You can say, what is the day tomorrow? A question gets answered. Something that is often, while generative AI is something that is very trendy in the media over the last couple of years, this is not something new. How many folks in this audience have got an Alexa in their house? And just by saying that, I may have triggered someone online's Alexa in their living room to pop up. That is an example of how generative AI has worked in the past, where questions get asked, inferment models work on the rich data sets, and then you get a response out of it. And then that is where you get the baseline. Then fine-tuning comes. When you keep having a back and forth conversation with these tools will learn from what are the things you are asking and is able to refine the questions and get you better and better responses. So from a high level, again, not jumping too technical into it, generative AI is just a way for you to use the swaths of information available on a trained set and get answers that you need. So now let's jump into generative AI and Lego and how it comes into things. So Lego actually has already had some controversies in generative AI space. So generative AI is one of those things that has a lot of pros and a lot of cons. So think of it as like a double-edged sword, where it can improve your productivity and make improvements while also having negative impact in terms of how it's viewed, the labor that's put in, along with a bunch of other things. So Lego actually, not just a few months ago, on some of their social media platforms, uploaded a series of polls where they said, hey, do you prefer Ninjago character X or Ninjago character Y? And it was an idea to get engagement from the community. Where the controversy struck in this is, rather than using actual Lego to do the comparison, whoever had created this social media poll had instead opted to use Copilot or another generative AI source to get all of the images for them. As you can see on the top right, that is one of the images that was available on that poll. As you can clearly see, that is Lego, but not Lego. Where it gets funny, though, in all of this is, as we always like to say, things are illegal when it comes to building techniques, but when Lego does it, suddenly it becomes legal. So does that mean that Lego's introduction of generative AI in some of their social media or tooling, does that mean we should start using on a day-to-day basis? While Lego did have controversy around this, I do think it's a great topic for us to discuss, because while generative AI may not be something that we want to use just to share content, can be something that can improve the content that we build. So while I'm not going to read it out, Lego did release a statement afterwards apologizing for the use of the generative AI in their content and highlighted how Lego is still a physical tool and they will still push towards that. But the fact that controversy was embroiled in such a simple topic shows that this is something that's on Lego's mind. So before we jump into the actual tooling, I just wanted to bring up some great uses of generative AI in research and industry. So generative AI, when we think of Lego creation, one of the things that we can always think about is, I have an idea. I want to turn this idea into a Lego model. How can I use AI to help build that model and make it a reality? Obviously, just uploading images and stuff are not feasible solutions. However, there's actually a paper by a number of grad students at MIT who are currently trying to explore that topic. What they are doing is they are actually working on a tool that, given an image and given a prompt saying, hey, my grid is 8 by 8, or in this case, 32 by 32, take that image and convert it into a Lego model, and then also release a set of instructions. Again, pretty cool and groundbreaking stuff. And while this tool is currently still just used as a research option, this just shows the levels that we will see over the next couple of years in how Lego building will be enhanced by these tools. As we can see just from that image, they took an image of a plane. Their first 8 by 8 looks rather rudimentary, and while not bad, it's straightforward. But as we start refining it further and further, we can see all the details start coming in. In their paper, they are only using 1 by 2, 1 by 4, and 1 by 1 bricks, which is pretty simple. But you can just see this starting to develop over the years. Whether or not this is something that the general public will be able to use as a tool is still to be decided, because it's still just a research paper, but it's cool. So I'm going to jump a little bit, though, into the actual generative AI and how we can use it. That research paper is cool and all, but it's not something that we can really use on a day-to-day basis to improve what we're doing. So as I'm going through the slides, the first thing I want to call out is all the images I will be using for the slides moving forward are all images that have been generated using a variety of generative AI tools. So for this demonstration, I used 4 different tools that are currently available on the market, all of them free, and I'll share them all afterwards so people can play around with it. But the goal of including these images is just to give people a feeler of what can you build image-wise from Lego. Again, the focus here will be image heavy. However, generative AI is not just for images. As I mentioned earlier, text, video, and audio are facets as well. So the first one, an upside of using tooling to supplement your Lego, is builder's block. How many times have people wanted to build, but they just don't know how to get started? The worst enemy of most mock builders is the ideation phase. And ideation is something that can come out of nowhere, or something that you can see things around you and then sparks come into your mind and you know what to build. With ideation taking up a lot of time, ideation is something that can be improved using the ability of these tools. So what these tools can allow you to do is, while they may not give you a direct Lego model that you can build, a lot of the tools out there, you can start asking questions like, hey, I want to build a model. These are some of my thoughts, but I don't know exactly what it is. Can you give me some ideas? These tools can base off of your conversation and build upon what you're trying to ask and can give you some great ideas. These great ideas, again, can't be one-to-one translated into Lego, but can set a foundation that you can then use these models in order to build real sets. And I'll give you some examples of those later. As I mentioned earlier, creativity is a big factor in all this. Creativity is something that is a double-edged sword. People say you can't teach creativity, but I tend to disagree. Creativity is based on what experiences you have around you, what you see on a day-to-day basis, the conversations you had, the media you consume. All of that plays its role into building a creative mind. That creative mind can be accelerated and accentuated using these tools. These tools can give you ideas that can allow you to build upon them. And as I'll show you later, even just something that may seem small and trivial. So let's say I wanted to build a chair because I'm looking at a chair, but I didn't know what a chair would look like, hypothetically. I could ask these questions like, hey, I would like to build a chair with black metal frames and gray cloth. Please generate an image of this. In the past, you could just have these ideation phases by just going to the internet and searching for these images, but sometimes the internet isn't able to give you exactly what you need, especially if your images and your ideas are abstract and out of there. If we just go down to the floor downstairs, we will see a lot of the creations that people have built are creations that are abstract and are things that you may not have come up with or find things online that can help influence. So a lot of those things could instead, if you didn't have the ideas yourself, could have been something that you derive after working with these tools. Prototyping is a big factor in all of this as well. As Lego is an iterative process, a lot of what you build, you don't like, you destroy. You build, you don't like, you destroy. While this experience allows you to nurture your ideation and your creativity, it can also be a painful process and tedious. And this is where the generative AI comes into this. Very quickly, you can create a large amount of prototypes, have the prototypes be built upon each other, and come to what it is that you'd like to build in a short span of time. That allows you to then focus your time on the actual creation of the Lego. I'm sure many people in this audience don't have infinite time on their hands, and many people, their MOCs may take years to build. Just think about how some of that iterative process could be streamlined by using these tools. And again, as I'm saying with these things, a lot of these may sound as positives, but as I said, double-edged swords. Sometimes some of these positives can take the fun out of building. Sometimes that iterative process is what really gets you into building. I'm sure half of the people here, their favorite thing about Lego cons is at the end of the con being able to tear down what they've built and start from new. That is something that you don't get to experience directly with this generative AI system. But it's something that, again, pros and cons. The last one I want to really call out, though, is cost. I'm sure everyone here has spent more money than they would like on Lego at times. Lego is unfortunately not always the most accessible hobby. And with a lot of factors in socioeconomic status, affecting people's ability to play, it can really hamper people's ability to enjoy Lego to the fullest if you have a very limited selection of parts. This is where generative AI can help provide a little bit of that equal playing field by having your ideation phase be a digital experience. Granted, BrickLink and other sources can do this as well, but this is where generative AI and BrickLink can work together, and you can feed both of them the information you need to build what you want to build, and then either have that be a digital build or use BrickLink's built-in capability to only buy the parts you need. That allows the Lego building experience to be a much more accessible experience, because now you can iterate and build a cool concepts without needing to buy all the pieces. Again, a cool experience, pros and cons, but it's a great way to allow everyone to enjoy Lego a little bit more. Now we go onto the downsides a little bit. And as you will see in that image, it's a little harrowing. Something I forgot to mention is underneath all the images are the exact first sentence prompt that I used in order to build the image that is in question. I will go over later what prompts mean and how you can optimize your prompts, but this is just an example of some of the images. So, first one, and it's a big topic in not just Lego generative AI, but generative AI in all facets, is theft and copyright infringement. This is a controversial topic because technically most things we do on a day-to-day basis are inferred from the media that we see around us. The argument that people have about the copyright infringement and theft in the generative AI space is that because the models were trained on content that may not be copyright free on the internet, the results that you get spit out may infringe on some ideas that others have had. While this is a valid concern, just think about music, for example. How many songs out there do you listen to and you think, hey, that chord progression sounds awfully familiar. I've heard that before in another song. I think a perfect example is, I believe, Dua Lipa. In her latest album, 9 of her songs were songs where they were sampled off of things in the 80s or 90s. Those, while not a concern, just goes to highlight how creative influences are derived by what you see around you. With that in mind, though, it is important to factor in how we use this data. So, how you use generative AI to enhance your Lego is important. If you are using generative AI to just generate content and then sell those content, that is where you start bordering into the realms of copyright infringement and theft, especially if the models that you are trying to generate are based on IPs that you don't have rights to. So that's just something that's worth keeping in mind in that huge red flag. The second, though, is the blurring between lines of reality and MOC. Just looking at that image on the top. I'm sure the more and more you look at an image, the more and more you think, wow, this image looks really messed up. On first glance, however, I guarantee you if someone walked into a room right now and just took a quick glance, you wouldn't think twice about whether or not this was Lego or if this was a fake image. That is where things start getting tricky. Generative AI is still in its early stages, so a lot of the images that are being generated are easy to catch as erroneous. However, as the technology improves, the content that we see online might not end up being content that people have built or come up with, and might be entirely content that has been created by AI. Again, this has interesting ramifications on how the hobby is enjoyed. Everyone's enjoyment of the hobby are completely different. But I know there are Instagram pages, for example, that are making a lot of money right now by leveraging generative AI to create models of, let's say, a Pepsi can or a light bulb or something. And then they try to parse those off as real Lego, and then they gain ad revenue from it. For the untrained eye and people who may not know better, this is something that starts becoming tricky and will lead to a lot of question marks over whether or not this is real Lego. Just think about our con. Our con has a huge physical presence, and that physical presence allows us to see what is real Lego. However, there's also a virtual component to it. There are people who have built amazing MOCs online who have submitted them for virtual viewing. In a couple of years' time, half of those submissions might end up being entirely generated out of AI and not real Lego models. That makes us start to question of what do we trust, and can we really trust what we see on the internet? Something that the answer is normally no to. Another downside that I just want to bring up with generative AI is its influence and the expectation on the creative building process. While I harped on a lot earlier about how this can improve the ideation phase, this also comes as a double-edged sword. By relying too heavily on these tools, you may no longer have the ability to come up with great ideas on your own, and it may actually hamper your ability to build cool things. That over-reliance on tooling, however, is not just something with generative AI, and is an over-reliance on tooling that can affect everything across the board. Just think of all the addictions that people have with like social media or phones or tooling that previously was a very manual process that you relied your brain on, that now just has tooling to do. Whether this will have a negative or positive impact on the long-term MOC experience is still to be determined, but it's always something that is worth thinking about as we start using these tools. That also plays into that trial by error. A lot of people here come up with great ideas through failure. Failure is the greatest way to learn new things, and with Lego that is no different. People come to cons, people see what others have built. People build, people break, people rebuild over and over again. That reinforced muscle allows you to build cooler and cooler models as your techniques and learnings come into place. Just think about the 10,000 hours rule. When people spend 10,000 hours doing something, they become a master at it. And then you start building cool stuff in terms of Lego space. While generative AI may streamline your building process, it may start to erode some of that mastery of the hobby, which may potentially lead to regressed experiences in the future. Again, this is still all new, so that regressed experience might not end up being a concern if the pros outweigh the cons, but it's still something that we have to think about. The last one is, with generative AI, and while it's still early in its infancy stages, it doesn't really understand what Lego means. As we can see from the images, it knows a general idea of what a Lego brick looks like, or what are the bricks available, but the tooling isn't smart enough right now to be able to build with real Lego bricks. And just think about it every year. Every beginning of the year, you look at the Lego palette and you think, wait a second, where did these 10 new pieces come from? That is something that is still going to keep having to evolve, and these tools will have to keep catching up on it. If you actually go to the Brick Architect website, we actually have a page on there that covers all of the bricks that are being released every year and its popularity. And you can just see the large amount of pieces that Lego keeps introducing on a year-to-year basis. And while this is a great experience, as it allows you to build super cool things, it also means that if you're reliant on these tools, you may miss out on some of that magic. The other one, and this is a topic that can often be controversial, is the Lego Ideas program. The biggest benefit on Lego Ideas is people's ability to come up with cool designs and just release them and then have those become real Lego sets. While most of the Lego sets that end up being released through the Ideas program are influenced by media out there, with a large majority of them being based on movies or TV shows, there are some real great ideas that do just come out of nowhere with no base IP. Does the use of this generative AI tooling to help solve the ideation phase? That we'll be curious to see whether or not that leads to a large image spam and idea spam in the Ideas program, or whether that will result in better sets being released. As of right now, a lot of the Ideas program is all about let's release as much content as possible and hit 10,000 views on all so that we might get a set to hit. Because if you look at the Lego Idea program, the recurrence rate of once people become popular on Lego Ideas, their subsequent sets are more likely to hit 10,000 because there's that past positive experience. That in combination with the generative AI may only lead to even more sets release. And it may even result in Lego adding new rules in place on how they may want to judge Lego Ideas models. But again, this is all new, not just to us, but Lego, and it's something for all of us to think about. And the last one is something that I really dislike, but it's always something that I like calling out. Lego isn't just about clicks. I understand the dopamine hit that people have by posting stuff online and then refreshing saying, hey, I have 10 likes, I have 15 likes, I have 20 likes. What's curious is this process might actually end up being exacerbated with the introduction of generative AI. As I mentioned earlier, there are some Instagram pages, for example, that have 60 or 70,000 followers, and all they do now is just post generative AI images. They used to post mock content, but now it's all about content glut. By flooding social media with as much content as possible, it can often lead to people's social media growing. However, at what cost? you may lose out on some of those benefits that you may otherwise have had if your focus becomes too heavy on that angle. So, as we talk about the negatives in generative AI, I want to talk a little bit about AI and how it doesn't understand Lego. Again, this image, at first glance, you think, hey, this is something that I could build out of Lego. But as you start looking more and more into it, you're like, wait a second, some of these connections don't seem legal, or some of these parts don't actually exist. And this is a great example of how generative AI doesn't understand Lego. Because the source of data that is being trained on is everything on the internet and hasn't been targeted specifically for Lego, the models in place aren't designed to build Lego. That MIT research paper that I showed earlier might be a deviation on this because their core focus was on Lego. It allowed them to have more refined experiences. Because this is a broad experience, you will have answers that will be tackling from a broad point of view. And as a result, again, as I mentioned, Lego is not the target. The biggest value that I get out of generative AI and that I think all of us could take is it's not the content that it generates that gets you what you need, but how it can be used to supplement your existing experiences. So the ideation phase is the biggest value add with generative AI. As I mentioned earlier, generative AI also then brings up the topic of inspiration versus influence. And that influence, what you have on a day-to-day basis, will likely influence your Lego building. I saw some MOCs downstairs which were influenced by past MOCs that people built in the past. I think there was someone who built a miniature model of some of the models that were very large last year. That's a great example of influence. Yes, generative AI may have helped you, could have helped you do that as well, but while that may have been viewed as a negative on a generative AI point of view, from a non-generative AI point of view, if people are just influenced by looking at something, it would have been okay. So this is why generative AI shouldn't always be seen as a negative, because yes, you may be influenced by it, but you're influenced by things on a day-to-day basis anyway. With generative AI, what's important is writing the content. So writing the question and knowing what to ask is half the battle. You can't just wave a magic wand and have generative AI tell you the answers to everything. Maybe in the future it will, but for the time being, we're still safe. With the generative AI, though, is knowing what you want to ask is also a good exercise in creative thinking and ideation. While previously they may have been a building experience, now you having to come up with what are the right questions can really lead to the right ideas being generated. But in turn, by you having now a different thinking mindset, you might be able to actually come up with ideas that you otherwise wouldn't have had. There are things that I have used for my mock building where I've tried to get generative AI to give me ideas, but I ended up not using anything it generated, but instead saying, hey, by me taking the time to ask these questions in a sequential format and building upon these questions, I actually came up with an answer myself that I thought was better, and that allowed me to build cool things. So, while generative AI, though, is a tool that can support, it is important to know that this does not replace Lego. Lego still needs to be built at the end of the day for the most part. Sure, there are digital creations out there, but the joy of Lego is the building of it. The idea generation is something that people can enjoy as well, but that is something that may apply to all facets of the hobby. So the idea generator portion of this can only serve to supplement your building. So now I look at it in an art community. So as you see in that first image, that is a very terrifying model of Pikachu in Lego. That is an example of where copyright infringement and theft comes into it. In this example, I didn't even say Pikachu. In the question I just said, generate a Lego model from the video game Pokemon and put a Lego box next to the build. It did a pretty good job at that. It determined what I wanted to build. It took some creative influence in it. It thought, hey, you know, maybe Pikachu should be running and should have a base. Went crazy and decided to build what it did. But again, it looks off. That being said, look, you'll have nightmares about this. I'm sure if you close your eyes right now, you'll just see Pikachu running towards you. That being said, although the controversy with generative AI, at the end of the day, generative AI is still art. Whether people like to gatekeep it or not, it's just a modernization of the hobby, modernization of art in general, and it's something that will not go away. Art in general is derived by the influences from what you see around you. How is that different with generative AI? As I mentioned earlier, many people like to gatekeep generative AI in the art community, and people are fair to do so. People put in a lot of time and effort to come up with ideas, to build cool things, to create cool art, and generative AI may have a shortcut to all of that. However, that doesn't mean it should go away. Most of the tools out there, just think 10 years back. If you had gone and said, hey, I built this MOC using BrickLink Studio, you would have gotten a few sneers and side eyes being like, oh, that is not real Lego. But look where we are now. It's not going away. Let's embrace it. While it does a good job at this, the biggest thing that I think is nice in the art community is that process is easier. The showcasing builds, sharing ideas from others is great. I recently built a MOC and in a collaborative build. And as we were designing the build, instead of everyone building their stuff, we used like images, sketches that we made, some generative AI images, and we used those as our source material to build what we finally wanted to build. Again, that sped up the ideation process, I said, and was a great experience, and is something that can also be used in the art space. Where it does come at a concern is that oversaturation. Having too much art overloading the community could lead to a redundance in experience and can also lead to people just burning out. If everyone sees 100 AI-generated images and then one non-AI-generated image, people may be like, well, this is just what the hobby's become. So it's something that needs to be used in moderation. Where this does come, though, is with the art community, with Lego being a tight-knit group of people, if people start to use generative AI and they start profitizing off these images, because the community is so tight-knit, we will know about it. Not that people should stigmatize others for it, but it's important to keep things in check. As people use generative AI images to steal people's ideas and then mark it off as their own, it's important to call out some of this plagiarism in place. Just look at some of the great builds out there. If someone went around parading the builds that you had made as if it was their own, with slight modifications with generative AI, it's important to call them out on it. And by as a community working together and ensuring that the plagiarism is not something that becomes too abundant, it helps us have control over how generative AI plays in all of this. So, I'm talking a lot. I'm sure everyone's here being like, great, you're telling me all about this stuff, but I actually want to do things, because that's what Lego's for. Everyone here wants to do things. There's a wide variety of tools on the internet that can allow you to get started. A bunch of them are paid, a bunch of them are free. Paid ones are obviously going to get better results, but that doesn't mean that it's what you need to use. I've just listed 6 options that are free options that you can just pull out your phone after this session and start playing around with it a little bit just to get ideation. But as you want to iterate on it, paid options may be what you want to explore. As each of these tools have their strengths and weaknesses based on the models they've been trained on, it's important for us to do some research. There's a lot of great writers online who have written large swaths of articles about strengths and weaknesses of each, and something that I'm not going to go over in all detail, but just search any of these topics and maybe throw in the word Lego afterwards, and you'll see content that people have generated from this. The one that I will recommend that we can get really started on really easily is ChatGPT, Bing Copilot, and Gemini Copilot. Those are items that everyone should be able to have on their phone. You can start asking questions, you can get text-based answers, you can get image-based answers, and you can start getting that ideation flowing. What I encourage all of you to do is, as you walk around the con, look at some of the MOCs that people have built and try to pull out your phone. And as you're doing this, maybe you try to describe what you've seen built and then see what does generative AI generate for that image. Let's say there's a spaceship that someone built, a red spaceship with blue wings, such and such. You might go to this tool and say, hey, if AI were to build this, what would it have done if I described this image? And that thought process is a great exercise for all of us to start seeing how the differences in our physical play and our digital play are in play. As you can see here, while in the image is a great example of the harrowing nature of generative AI. While this looks pretty much like Lego, the pieces and everything, there are still nuances that make it look odd. And as I said, things will improve, things will get better. In a few years' time, someone may be giving a talk like this in BrickCon, and this image may look undecipherable. the important thing with generative AI is, as I mentioned, is asking the right question. So what's important is, how do you write a good prompt? The question that you ask is the basis of the answers that you get. If you feed your model garbage, you will get garbage out. You don't want to feed the model garbage, so you want to train yourself to write the right sort of questions. Some of the important things to consider, firstly, is that less is more. If you start blabbing on and saying way too much and trying to get ideas on that, the model will actually use every word that you ask it as a basis into what it's building. What that can result is leading to convoluted responses and can lead to some trickiness. And I'll give an example of that later. Using simple words is also important. One of the big things that generative AI is often known for is using big, sophisticated words, and it can lead to confusion. But this is where the opposite occurs when you feed it information in. Using very simple terms is actually going to lead to better results at the end of it. It seems backwards, but based on the exercises that people have done, it actually is surprising. Being descriptive is important as well. Try not using filler words when you ask for things. Be very descriptive with what you want. Add all of the relevant details. If you ask Copilot to, for example, generate a red rocket ship. Red rocket ship is very vague. I'm sure me just seeing red rocket ship will have a few folks in the audience thinking about a red rocket ship, and I guarantee you all of you are thinking of a different thing. While that's not a bad thing, it showcases our creativity and our thinking, but it goes backwards when it comes to generative AI. You want to be very descriptive. If you're trying to build a rocket, and again, with the prompts, it doesn't always have to be Lego-based. You can also generate non-Lego images, and then you use that as your ideation against Lego. You'd want to go in and say, show me a red rocket that is approximately 20 feet long. It has 3 blue wings on the side and has a cockpit made of yellow. On the side include graffiti in colors XYZ. By being very descriptive, it gives the model more information to work with. And while that seems to contradict with the less is more statement I've made, it shows that you have to be very careful with your words, but use good words. Every word you use matters. Being iterative is also important. A lot of the generative AI tools out there are conversation models. So they've been trained to iterate based on what you're saying. As you have a conversation with these tools can build upon the information that you've already shared and start making improvements. In the exact next slide, I will show how just a series of 3 questions led to a completely different experience by fine-tuning. By fine-tuning, it also allows us to do some critical thinking on what information have we been given and how do we want to build upon what we've been given in order to get where we want to go. So think of it as not just hitting the destination, but that journey as you go along the way, as cliche as it sounds, is super important because it allows us to really think about what we want. And as we step back and think about what we want, we start to come up with ideas. Think of it akin to people who storyboard or scrapbook with ideas. You have an idea in your head, but it's not fleshed out. You jot some things down, you go back to the drawing board with what you jotted, and then you just keep refining it until you get what you want. The last one is actually a funny one, is using tools to generate prompts. You can generate good prompts using tools. Ask the tool to generate a prompt and then feed that prompt into the model, and that can get you exactly what you need. So I will now just jump into some examples. So this is an example of 3 questions that I asked in sequential to Copilot to generate a Lego image. The first one I asked is generate an image of a pair of black and silver headphones. Again, I didn't go into too much details, but it did the job. It generated an image of black and silver headphones. I could then use this as a foundation and say, great, I now want to build something. I can base it off this image that I have. But let's say I want to take it a step further and I want to make it out of Lego. The next question I gave was, take the last image and make it made out of Lego. Again, this was an example of ambiguity. I didn't specify what should be made out of Lego. I just say made out of Lego. So what it inferred was, I'm going to take a Lego head and put headphones on it. Again, a little more Lego-fied, but not perfect. The next one I said afterwards is remove the Lego head and make it more similar to the first image in style. As you can see, It knows what has been asked previously, and then can have a conversation. It now generated an image that looks a little more Lego-like. Immediately, you can see that and say, hey, a bunch of those pieces are not real Lego pieces. But that doesn't matter. The point of this is not to serve as a replacement to your Lego, but just to give you an idea of what would this sort of look like in a Lego form. And what you could now do is say, all right, I'm going to look at this, and then I'm going to look at the Lego pieces available and try to see how can I replicate this sort of experience. Now you'll be able to see this is how a headphones may look like in Lego form. Again, far from perfect, but a great tool. Here are some additional examples. This is where we start getting a little more detailed and from a distance. The first one I asked is I wanted to generate the Tower of Orthanc from Lord of the Rings and include mountains and trees. Again, you look at that and you say, hey, you know what, this doesn't really look like Lego. That's perfectly fine. It's more of the ideation. But if you actually start looking into the tower itself, there's a lot of Lego-ified elements to this build. So you can start refining and building upon that to say, hey, I want to build a MOC out of myself. Let me use this to influence some of my building. Second one I generated, just for example's sake, is build a model of the Seattle Space Needle built out of Lego. Again, pretty general, gave you a Micropolis build for out a Space Needle. But again, a lot of question marks in all of this. As far as I remember, Queen Anne is not directly on the water, and there isn't a river flowing right next to the Space Needle. Might be in a couple of years with global warming, but hopefully not. But again, example, it's Lego-fied, gives you an idea of what to build, and maybe next year, one of you might come to the con with a Micropolis build that looks somewhat similar to this. Again, all about ideas. The last one is actually my favorite, because this one actually, at a first glance, looks very Lego-fied. In this one, I just basically asked it to build a Lego model of a bald eagle with spread out wings, and I specified don't use too many pieces. It tried to infer what may be Lego pieces, generated a model of this eagle, and honestly, at first glance, it wouldn't surprise me if someone built a model that looks similar to this and displayed it as a con, because it looks pretty great. Again, at closer look, you can tell it's not Lego. But again, influence that generates ideas. So, as I go into the last slide before I jump into questions, I just want to say it's important that generative AI is here to stay. Whether you like it, whether you don't, whether you want to use it, that's entirely up to you, but it is not going away. The technology will keep being refined, and there will be more and more things that come out that can help improve people's experiences. Don't be too critical with those who do want to try it out. It is very easy in hobbies for people to gatekeep and like to keep things the status quo. As a result, you may be shutting out people who want to try new things. If you see someone around you who is trying to build new things with generative AI or having it influence what they build, embrace it and encourage them and provide feedback on how they can improve, or even take it upon yourself to build it. Next one is have fun. Generative AI is a tool that supplements. It's not a replacement. Lego at the end of the day is something that all of us do because we enjoy it and we want to have fun. So let's make sure we continue to do so with this tooling. I feel like I don't have to repeat it, but again, it's not just all about clicks. The experience, pun not intended given it's Lego, but sorry, terrible. Social media clicks is not everything that we want. We should be very important, we should make sure that as we build with generative AI, we don't use it as a replacement to our hobby. There is nothing wrong if you want to use it as a replacement, but it's important to use it as a supplement, as that can only enhance your hobby. It is very easy for you to find a replacement and then have that burn you out of the hobby altogether. The last one is, with a lot of the open AI technologies being open source, if people are technically savvy, there's a lot of opportunities for us to actually improve these systems. Take a look at that MIT research paper. A bunch of Lego hobbyists love generative AI, so they decide to build tooling that can tailor it directly to Lego and generative AI. There's a lot of tools out there. We'll look at like BrickLink. It wouldn't surprise me if in a few years BrickLink has embedded generative AI properties into it, or other tools out there. There's a lot of cool things that you can use models to help supplement your experience, and it's something that everyone will be able to leverage in the long term. With that, since I'm getting a time check, I will bring it open to any questions that people have. And if you have questions online, then they'll be read out to me. Otherwise, go here. Oh, and just a plug. While this talk is pretty high level, In the future, I'll be diving more deep onto this on the Brick Architect website. So if people go to Brick Architect website, you can see cool articles such as the ones like this one available. Awesome. Question?
So to my understanding, generative AI uses images of Lego sets it finds online to make these images.
Correct.
Is generative AI ever using digital models of Lego? So it's not just looking at it from the outside in, but actually this is what the instructions say to build a Lego set from individual pieces.
So a lot of the generative AI learnings out there, the models that they are trained off is just everything that's available online. So from a Lego point of view, that's either the Lego set, MOCs that people have created, research papers that Lego may have released, or even public dumps of Lego instructions. Again, how these models directly infer in Lego is still to be determined, but a lot of how the Lego sets we see here, like this noodle shop, to determine what is a legal build, it may have learned from instructions that have been made public, and it tries to use that to influence build. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, thanks.
And again, with all of this, and to that question, if people wanted to build a model that is directly targeting to Lego, you could train the model entirely just on Lego sources, and then the outputs you would get would be significantly better because you would no longer be muddied by the infinites of terabytes of data that is available out there. Yeah, BrickCon is trained only on Lego. If you look at, BrickCon is a great example of that. What BrickCon does is it takes pictures of a bunch of Lego, is able to itemize what it sees in the image into a part, and then it tries to give you an inventory of what is the parts that are available in the picture that you took, and then it says, hey, based on rebrickable sets or real Lego sets, here are some things you can build with the pieces you have available. And while it's not generative AI in the sense of it can be used for back and forth ideation to build upon sets you don't have, it's a great way to look at what pieces you do have and build something cool. And I encourage people to have a look at the BrickCon tool. It's pretty basic, but it's still a cool way to just get an idea of what it is to come. It's not going to build the cool MOCs you have out there, but it might give you some very straightforward ideas. And especially with people with smaller children who may not need overly complex sets, that is a great way to get them involved in the MOC building scene. Sorry, long answer to a short question. Anything else or in the chat? Well,
This, what I'm going to say, is more of a thinking like 3 or 5 years out. Since it's not established sort of like a rule or like a regulation of what AI can and cannot do in the commercial space, I guess, with IP, intellectual properties, meaning there's a lot of us fans that love, like, I don't know, Halo or any other IP that maybe Lego will not work with, and vice versa. Is there a legal thing or anything that you see that might jeopardize or in the next few years or affect all the AI, because somebody could do an AI image of a set and then maybe commercialize that, even though it's like they're putting it on their own website, but maybe, print posters, whatever, stickers.
I will preface it with saying I am not a lawyer, so I have no idea for the details. But from my personal opinion, legality in AI is very tricky, mostly because how you determine what can be and can't be used. While you may be using generative AI to, let's say, your example, generate a Halo model and release it, how is that different than people who are printing custom parts and have designed Lego things in the Halo space by hand, or custom sets on Rebrickable and marketed those? Where it gets a little tricky is often people like to say, because it's AI that generated it, it's suddenly bad. But everything AI is doing is something that we could do anyway. So from a legality point of view, it'll become very tricky to discern the differences between, is this right or wrong? Because if AI did this, it shouldn't be wrong if a human did it manually, it being right. So this might come in tandem. And to yours, it brings up a great point because you just look at Rebrickable as an example with theft. A lot of people come up with really great models and they release it on Rebrickable and have MOCs available for people to purchase. These may infringe on IP that exists, but as it stands right now, it's a MOC, so you can't really confirm that. I don't know Lego's stance on pushing that, but I feel that they haven't been policing that, so I don't see why they police it here. Where it does have questions with legality, though, is you look at a lot of the off-brand Lego sets that are built. There's a lot of people out there who actually scour Rebrickable, buy a MOC, mass-produce sets off that MOC using fake Lego, and then sells that. That is where you start to get into the realm of violating intellectual property, because you can't really protect the idea side of it, but it's like how you use it is where it comes into it. All right, I think we're cutting it. We can chat afterwards, though, if people have more questions. Appreciate people coming by.